Hello everyone and welcome to a video on the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel. I'm Spencer, I'm the host of Constructive Criticism and one of your trophy mages, and today we are talking about hashtag Quest for 10. Hashtag Quest for 10 is my challenge for Standard right now, where I try and get 10 wins with every major Standard archetype. We started this, recording these at the end of last season with blue-red Drakes, and now we've moved on into this new Standard format. We did one for Sultai, and now we did one for Mono Red. So this is one that I kind of was excited about doing, and we'll get into why, but I'm not a very good Mono Red player, so I'm excited to kind of talk about both what I learned and kind of this journey through one that wasn't as fun for me. So the goal of Quest for 10 is for me to get 10 wins with any given, 10 match wins specifically, with any given major Standard deck. This is to help for a few reasons. I talked about how I don't think of myself as a very good Mono Red player, and part of that is because I don't play it enough. So giving myself an opportunity to play more of the style of aggro decks that are a little bit better, that I wouldn't typically play for myself, gives me a chance to kind of improve my game in multiple ways. This also makes me, I think, a better co-host to some of these better players that are on my podcast. Seth Manfield is one of the best players in the world. John Stern is, if you've listened to the podcast, you know the quality of people that I've brought onto this show. And I want to be able to speak knowingly about things when I ask them questions or when I comment on things myself. And Quest for 10 is part of a way for me to do that. So if you're following along at home, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg or patreon.com/thetrophymages. I stream a lot of the Quest for 10 for the trophy mages, and I have a Google Doc that has all the updated lists that I'm playing, the decks that are qualified if you want to play at home. So check that out at patreon.com/ccmtg and patreon.com/thetrophymages. So let's get into this one and talk about what happened. So Mono Red is the deck that qualified, and it actually qualified by at one point being 10% of the MTGO metagame. And before we get too far into this, I'm recording this on Sunday. It's probably going to be posted the same day. But if I go to MTG Goldfish right now, which I'll do, and I go to decks, and I pull this deck up, it has dropped all the way down to 5%. So it's lost half of its metagame share. And if we click on that, and one of the ways to qualify is through MTGO stuff, and the other is to qualify through putting up major results at major tournaments. This deck did not top 8 the mocks. It had a 5-3, and then it did okay at the Classic with its best finish, being a 5th place. But other than that, this deck, it didn't do well. It did well at the PTQ, one of the first PTQs. It had a 7-1, so it did well there. But overall, this deck just hasn't been performing in the last week when I've been playing it. And I think we'll get into some of my thoughts around that as we talk about this deck. So it didn't qualify through doing super well at a bunch of tournaments. It qualified through making up a large enough percentage of the metagame. And it doesn't actually make up the percentage of the metagame needed to qualify anymore. After I started this challenge, it started to drop. And there's a few reasons why that we'll get into. So the final list that I played is on your screen. It's 4 Fanatical Firebrand, 21 Mountain, 4 Ghitu Lavarunner, 4 Shock, 4 Viashino Pyromancer, 2 Risk Factor, 4 Goblin Chainwhirler, 4 Skewer the Critics, 4 Light Up the Stage, 4 Wizard's Lightning, 4 Lightning Strike, and 1 Lava Coil. The sideboard is 1 more Risk Factor, 2 Banefire, 2 more Lava Coil, 2 Treasure Map, 2 Mountain, 2 Fiery Cannonade, and 4 Rekindling Phoenix. So let's talk about the main deck for a second. So I tried a ton of different things. I think that if I were to change one card in the main deck today, I might cut one of those Skewer the Critics for another Risk Factor, and then take the Risk Factor out of the sideboard and change up the sideboard a little bit. I think the main deck is pretty good. I think that you win a lot of your game ones, as we'll kind of see throughout the matches and things like that. But I really did think that the main deck and kind of like the core of Mono Red's game 1 matchup is pretty good. Maybe it's still a best of 1 deck that you're pretty happy playing, but it doesn't have any glaring problems, I would say. I think that the main deck overall was pretty good. I think that 21 lands is totally reasonable. I know a lot of people play 22. If you want to play something like Experimental Frenzy, I don't think that's where the deck wants to be, but I'm not sure. And then the deck, it kind of just plays out more like a burn deck than an aggro deck. You have a lot of burn spells, right? You have 4 Wizard's Lightning, you have 4 Lightning Strike, you have 4 Skewer the Critics, so those all deal 3 damage. You have 2 to 3 risk factors depending on your ability. 4 Shock. Viashino Pyromancer acts as a burn spell. Ghitu Lavarunner has hastes. Even Goblin Chainwhirler, when it enters the battlefield, deals extra damage to the face. So the deck has a ton of just overall, like every spell in the deck deals damage to your opponent in some way right away, other than Lava Coil in the main deck. And the deck just kind of plays out like that. So I think that the thing that is really interesting with this deck is kind of how good Light Up the Stage is. Early on I thought one of the key things that you want to do is cast Light Up the Stage to hit your land drops. And the truth is like if you burn through lands and you're getting flooded and you have extra lands in your hand, it doesn't really matter. And just try to maximize your mana every turn is still really important and still really good with Light Up the Stage. If you can ever afford to like cast Light Up the Stage to hit land drops, you should definitely do it, but it's not like a requirement. Overall, I think Light Up the Stage is the best card in the deck. It lets you really pull away from games in a real way. I think that the second kind of key card, and this list that's on the screen now is actually the least amount of them I played the entire time in the form of Risk Factor. This card is actually really good right now because you have so many burn spells that you force your opponent into not really having decisions with this card, and you always get what you want. Because you don't care which side of it resolves, because the 4 damage is just such a huge chunk of their life total in your burn deck, and the 3 cards just means that you're going to draw into enough damage to kill them no matter what. So both those cards were pretty pivotal. I think that card 3 isn't really a card that I want to talk about, just kind of the package. I think that Wizards plus Wizards Lightning is still really good. Just Ghitu Lavarunner and Viashino Pyromancer plus Wizards Lightning leads you to some of your very best draws. Just being able to have a lightning bolt in your deck that's specifically a lightning bolt is really good. And I don't think that, Skewer the Critics is any different. I think that overall, there's the number of pure lightning bolts that you get because you're playing that Wizards package is really, really powerful. I think the coolest interaction in the deck is probably when somebody plays a Planeswalker and minus it, and you get to kill it with a Viashino Pyromancer. That being able to deal damage to Planeswalker is often forgotten, and I definitely had a couple of times where I was able to take down a Planeswalker that minus to do something. So the sideboard, I tried so many different sideboards. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. One is that Banefire isn't as good as you think it is. I still have them in the board, but they're just not that great. Rekindling Phoenix was kind of the last addition to the sideboard, and that card was way better than some of the other stuff I was trying. So I was trying like Experimental Frenzy with Runaway Steamkin and stuff like that, and it wasn't nearly as good as just playing a Rekindling Phoenix and overloading my opponent's removal and also being better against mono blue. I think that's the best addition to the sideboard by a pretty substantial margin. I probably don't need both of those mountains. Probably could just afford just playing one and then just kind of changing up the cards a little bit. I talked a little bit about the risk factor and maybe wanting that in the main deck. I think I would probably make that change if I was going to make another change to the sideboard. But overall, I think that between Fiery Cannonade, Rekindling Phoenix, stuff like that, the board definitely is better at the end of this than when I started. I definitely tried a ton of different stuff, and this version was the version that kind of felt the most right. So my overall record with the deck was 10-4. This is the worst record that I've had so far on the Quest for 10, and it's still a pretty good matchup. Still a pretty good win percentage, I should say. I'm really bad at these decks, and I think that contributed to the fact that I went 10-4 instead of 10-2 or 10-1. I also think that this deck is worse than the other decks. I think the sideboard for this deck is pretty bad. The fact that we're talking about how good Rekindling Phoenix is out of the board, rather than just be a main deck card, I think shows the weakness of the mono red sideboard. You can't really afford to go big and just sideboard into a whole nother deck with treasure maps and Rekindling Phoenix and Experimental Frenzy. I tried tons of different versions, and I don't think that any of them really. There wasn't matchups where that was substantially better, so the transformational sideboard stuff doesn't work, and the mono red just doesn't have good sideboard cards right now to begin with. I think that being able to play Lava Coil when you want that is pretty good, and bringing it to play treasure map in certain matchups can be fine. But overall, not too much that impressed me. I would probably lean a little bit more into that transformational stuff and move that risk factor, maybe get a little bit more big spell stuff, maybe kind of Banefire because they're not that good, and kind of figure out what cards do I want and what cards do I want to board out, and come up with a board plan that makes sense against maybe things like mono blue and and mid-range to just that I can get narrow in on the decks that I want to beat, and then build kind of transforming sideboards, because I think that's the only option for sideboards with these mono red decks, because the sideboard cards are really bad and you don't have very many good ones. I think that the other thing is that mono blue is a little bit of a harder matchup than people say it is. I definitely beat mono blue in this challenge, so it's not like I'm not saying like it's like a horrendous matchup, but people seem to think it's a buy for mono red, and I definitely don't think that's true. In fact, I actively don't think that's true. I think that when I think about the games versus mono blue, I actually think that I have to get a little bit lucky, and when they're on the play, it gets pretty hard. I don't think it's that hard for them to play a game of Protect the Queen against you, because your deck is all removal, right? So you just try and point them all at their creatures. But the problem is like if you just draw like one land too many, you're gonna lose that matchup. And I also think that them having an X4 that flies and is just huge is actually kind of a problem. And the number of times where their flash 2/2 is really good against you, Merfolk Trickster, I think it's called. It's pretty good against your deck at large. So overall, I think that matchup is worse than people say. Like I said, you can still win. It's not like I'm not saying that, but I don't think it's a buy. Like, I don't think that you just win that matchup automatically. And then I think that the other thing that I continue to struggle with aggro decks is understanding like where to point my removal or to point my burn spell specifically. I had a message with a friend that they were like, just try pointing them at their face every single time, and it's like, well, I can do that, but like then I can't attack into their 1/3, right? So understanding where things matter is important. So like a really good example of this is Goblin Chainwhirler. It's the best card in your deck, but you board it out a lot, and I don't think I was realizing how often I was supposed to be boarding it out at the beginning of the matchups. And when I was boarding it out, I would like be boarding it out on the draw for at one point Runaway Steam Cannon. That's not very good. So kind of just understanding like I'm on the play or on the draw. What's my role supposed to be this game? And then playing according to that plan, because that's going to win you the most games with these mono red decks. So if I were to kind of go over where I think this deck stands, I would not recommend people play mono red right now. I think that there's a reason that it's dropping off on popularity. I think one of the reasons is because the mono blue matchup isn't as good as people think it is, and they definitely have sideboard cards to beat you. So I think that like if you're going to play in a best of 3 tournament, I would not take mono red. I think that the deck is certainly good, but I don't think that it's good enough. Until somebody figures out maybe ways to like play just duress out of the board, or just having a better sideboard overall probably improves this deck quite a bit. And it's part of the reason that like red black was so good, right? Is that red black got to play really good sideboard cards and also play Chainwhirler. So it's possible that that's the direction that this deck needs to go, and we just kind of have to tune it and figure out what that looks like. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with this deck. 10-4 is a good record. I think that when I look back on this part of the quest for 10, I think I learned something, right? I think that I got the chance to play with a deck that I wouldn't typically play, and I even forced myself to play like I was pretty done. I think I was 5-0 at one point, and I lost all 4 of them in a row. Maybe I lost 3 in a row, but I was like, oh man, I'm so done with this. But I kind of forced myself to change up my list and keep playing and continue to learn about different matchups and different cards. So I think that this kind of shows the beauty of the quest for 10 and what I'm trying to get out of it. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're over on Pure MTGO and watching this, go on over to the YouTube channel. And don't forget that you can get the notes, the deck list, the things that I'm doing by going to patreon.com/ccmtg and patreon.com/thetrophymages to get access to that Google Drive. So thank you, everybody, so much for watching, and we'll see you guys all next week.